Okay, this video is going to get into a couple of different things today. First, we're going to be using our new P365 Armorers kit, which includes the Armorers plate and our Armorers tool. This tool can do pretty much every operation for armoring on the P365 in just one tool, so that makes it pretty handy. We're going to go through what's I would call a modular type of installation here. So this is going to be a more detailed installation video with a lot closer views and going through different things that can go wrong. So first, we're going to be looking at a few different FCUs as we do this. This is a macro configuration. It has the curve trigger instead of the flat, but the triggers really have the same travel distance and so forth. It's just the difference between a curved trigger and a flat trigger. Our trigger kits are designed for upgrading the stock triggers. They do work with considerations on aftermarket triggers. A lot of people get the aftermarket triggers. They ask us about that. We don't really recommend using the aftermarket triggers because they typically aren't what people are looking for other than how they look. So if that's really what you want, is you want a different looking trigger, that's why you're going to go with a aftermarket made trigger. Very few of them have anything to do really with performance. Some of them have some set screws and stuff, and you can use those, or you can use the parts of our kit, but we can get into that more later. So I wanted to first show, this is our trigger kit installed, and this is kind of the limits of performance that you can get out of it. So there's about 1/8 of an inch of take up, about a 1/16 inch wall to break, so no creep really whatsoever, and resets right back to that wall. That overall trigger travel is cut in half compared to the stock. The creep's eliminated. So this trigger kit takes care of all those aspects, including pull weight. Pull weight's the easy part, and if that's all you care about, that's just one spring. There's other spring kits out there. We don't recommend doing those because they sell a bunch of springs that are hard to install and they can degrade primer strike reliability. So we just recommend, if all you want is pull weight reduction, is just get the one reduced powered striker safety spring that we sell as an alternative to doing those extensive spring kits. Okay, so we're going to get into how you do an install, and to do this, we're going to be compliant with all the rules of what we can show in videos and so forth. So we're going to take a gun that's already got the slide off. We're going to go ahead and so most people should know how to remove that. Starting with the install, first thing is we need to knock out this pin. The right way to do this, the best way, is don't go from this direction, go from the opposite direction, because the retaining is over on this side, the retaining pin, or I don't know what you call that, clip, I guess. So you push it out that way. This tool has some indexing and orientation to it. It's not ideal for that operation, but it definitely works and is completely adequate for performing that task. So that's the first one. Then we'll pull the FCU from the backside, pull it out of the grip module. Okay, this one has a manual safety. It's the same with a manual safety or without. For doing this modular installation, we're going to focus on the sear control spring first. We're going to go through all the aspects of that, what can go wrong, so forth, and show you how to do pretty much extensive armor operations on this in case it goes to that level. Our kit is designed to be a very quick install, and it can be extremely quick, as you've seen in our short install video. If you haven't seen that, you can do this very quickly if you've done it before. The first order of business is to remove the manual safety. To do that, you put it into the safe position. Some of these guns you can just continue to rotate it, but sometimes that detent there is kind of locked up and it won't allow it. So if you need to get it out the harder way, and this detent can fly on you, so make sure you either put this in a bag or hold your fingers over it so it's not going to fly. So how do you do this if you need to is push down from this side to give a little bit of leeway on this detent, and then use your armorer's tool and grab it kind of like this so that your fingers are going to retain that detent as you do it. So push that in and then rotate. And then I've captured that detent, and there's a detent and a spring. So if you are doing our kit with compatibility with the sear control springs and you need a modified manual safety, you'll reuse that spring and detent in there. So I'm going to take this guy out and we'll set him aside. And I just kept the spring and detent in there and was careful about that. So now I'm ready without that to go into the sear control spring installation. So our kit, is modular as mentioned. So this is everything to do with the pre-travel aspects, which is a slide cap that's modified that goes hand in hand with our pre-travel stop. So that we'll do next. So the two priorities on this gun are the creep. That's the biggest complaint, and to deal with that you need the sear control springs. Our sear control springs are a patented part. They're not really functioning like springs. They're more like a tube or a spacer. So the patent covers, both springs and tubes for accomplishing this purpose. So what it's doing is it's adjusting the ride height of the sear. So there's 3 springs in the pack. The idea is these are mass-produced firearms, and every one is a little bit different off the line. So those 3 different springs accommodate tolerance variations between guns. And then on a nominal tolerance gun, you can use some of the alternative springs to give a little bit different brake feel if you like a little bit of roll in your brake, which creep and roll are really the same thing. It's just if you desire a little bit of movement from the wall to the brake that's perceived, then you want a little bit more sear engagement that increases that travel, and then it perceives as a little bit of roll off in the brake. Most people actually want a really defined wall with no perceivable creep. So this kit allows you to do that. In the worst case, you might have a gun that's a bit of a tolerance outlier, so a number 3 spring will act like a number 1 in another gun. So we're going to look at this particular gun here. This is an older FCU, so it is a little bit of a tolerance outlier. I already know that going into it. So what I'm going to do is there's these little takedown safety interactions where when the takedown lever's in the forward takedown position, it pulls that sear down. Okay, so you be aware of that, and right here in this part, there's some interaction, some notches that interact between the slide catch and the takedown lever. So just be kind of aware of that. Sometimes to give you a little bit of leverage to get this safety lever pin out, you might need to move that takedown lever forward a bit. But with this tool, you don't really need to do that. You can just come in here like this and pry up on it. If I can see behind this camera. Okay, I'm going to move that a little bit just to give me a little bit of clearance. Okay, pry that safety lever up a bit so it's starting to come out. So now that it's out, it holds this safety lever over on this side. So as I start to pull that, it's out a bit now. That safety lever is going to drop free. So I recommend you drop that free so that you don't lose that as you're pulling this around and stuff. Now that this safety lever's up, this takedown bar could start to fall out. So if you want a quicker installation, you kind of hold and retain all this stuff so that you don't have to run into any issues. So what I'm going to do to install the sear control spring is I need this safety lever pin flush inside of the FCU. So this can be a little bit hard to see. Down in this region here is where that pin is riding. And so I'm pressing the sear, this safety lever pin is also the stop point for the ride height of the sear. So when I install that sear control spring over it, I'm going to adjust how high this sear rides. So I'm going to be using a little bit of pressure on this sear to make this safety lever pin easier to pull out and work with. So I'm going to push that down a little bit, and I'm going to work this safety lever pin to where it's flush inside the FCU. And I'll know that I get there once the sear pops up just slightly higher. and I don't want to pull it out all the way or I'm going to have to reseat the sear spring leg. And don't worry if you do that, because that's what this tool is for. It makes it very easy to reseat the sear spring legs as well. Okay, so I went ahead and I just ended up pulling that out all the way. So that can happen, and that's okay. I'm going to show you how to reseat that. So I'm going to use, first off, this is an older FCU, so I know that that sear spring is going to be challenging to get out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here to a different FCU that I know what it's going to do. So I'm going to pull its safety lever pin. Okay, and I pulled that out all the way. I don't recommend doing that because it's gonna, and then you're gonna have to reseat that sear spring leg. So now you can see inside this hole, there's the sear spring leg that has to get pushed back up. There's a ledge inside the FCU that rides on. I can't get that safety lever pin back in unless that sear spring leg is back up on there. So on most of these guns, you can reseat this through this same hole. And how you do that is you take the P365 orientation of this tool, you put it into this hole at that orientation, and then you rotate it clockwise. Okay, and then I can push it in slightly and then pull it back out. Okay, that didn't seat it, so I probably didn't get it in far enough. So I'm gonna try that again, rotate it, okay, and then pull it back out. Oh, still didn't seat. So one more try. And sometimes these won't seat up on in that. They can just wear out to where they don't hold up on the ledge. So this one's not holding up on the ledge anymore either. It was before I did this on camera. So I'm gonna try one more time just to see. Nope, it's not. So normally that would work, and then I could just insert the safety lever pin back in place, but it didn't work on that one, and it's not working. It's not going to work on this one either. So I'm going to try that again. So if you get lucky, that can be the easy way. And if you don't have this tool, you can try to use another tool to push that back up in there. But if you try to move that down, you're going to lose sear spring tension, and the gun's not going to function. So to do this the harder way, I'm going to remove the trigger spring back here, and so things are going to start to kind of fall apart. That's okay. I'll show you how to put that all together, and then I'll just assume that, okay, we got frustrated and everything kind of fell out here. So I'll pull that all out so that we can put it back together after we get the sear control spring installed. So I'm going to hold the trigger forward just because the trigger bar moves back and forth when I do this. And then I'm going to grab this spring. So I'm going to use my tool in this orientation, go under the spring, push it up, and then out, and then it just comes out. So this tool makes removing that spring easy as well. Then I can just drop that trigger bar, and then that disconnector can slide out and expose these through holes. So if I need to reseat this sear spring leg now, I can take my tool with the P365 logo up, put it in this hole, in this orientation, come all the way across until I run into that sear spring leg. And then I can rotate it 180 counterclockwise this time, and then I can take my safety lever pin and put it back into that hole, and I'm using my tool now as a slave pin to push that back through, and there I'm back in. And then I've got sear spring tension again and everything. So now I'm just going to line that up to where it's flush inside the FCU. Okay, back it out slowly. Okay, now the sear just popped up a little bit higher, so that's how I know that I'm good. I'm completely flush in there. So now I can go and install my sear control spring. I'm going to start On this install, I'm going to try to get the most I can out of it. If you don't want to do this as much, you might use a higher number sear control spring, but we'll assume you're somebody that wants to get the best possible elimination of creep in the brake. So I'm going to use the tool like this, or I could use the tool like this to hold the spring to orient it. I'm going to go this way because if I've got that safety lever pin flush there, then I can just come in here like this, bring this spring in here, and then kind of orient it so it's going to slide down in there. Okay, and now it just dropped down in there, and now all I have to do is just push the sear down, and that spring's riding on it, and I just push the sear down to the right point where it lines up well with that safety lever pin to put it back through. So there, I just put that through, and then it's binding up just a hair, so I'm gonna back it back out a little bit and find the right amount of sear tension that this is gonna slide nicely through. So I'm twisting back and forth. Okay, it went through the other side of this hole to where that little leg is just barely poking out in there. So now I want that flush so I can reinstall that safety lever on there. So I'm gonna back that out just a hair to where I don't have that pin in there. And then I can put my safety lever in. And if I have this all apart like this, I have this through hole so I can see it better. So safety lever, the orientation is there's a little pointy end that goes down into the FCU, and this rounded end goes forward. So I'm going to put that down back into there, get it kind of oriented as best I can. Then I'm just going to flip it over, and I didn't get it perfect, so this tool works great for this too. Is I'm just going to put the tool in there, and then I'm just going to spin it a bunch, and that's going to orient that right, and then I can push that safety lever pin on the back side right there, and then it will just push that tool back out. And now my safety lever is captured back on the end of that. Okay, so this was the more complicated way of doing that. So I just installed a #1 sear control spring. One of the things I can do right now is check how that #1 sear control spring is looking as far as the sear ride height reduction. So if I'm taking a look at that, I'm going to look at the side of the FCU here. And relative to the side of the FCU, I can take my tool here, and I can use it as a little gauge to say, okay, so that's as long as I'm able to push that sear back down with this tool on the side of the FCU, then that's probably about the right engagement level. But the right way to do that is we're going to check it with the armorer's plate. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reinstall everything and get it back to just the only part installed is just that sear control spring. So since I went ahead and assumed, I didn't hold everything in place, I'm going to show you how to put all that back together now. So first thing, I'm going to reinsert this disconnector. So there's like a little tabbed end that will slide into the FCU here. So it slides into a little rail, and then it goes back and forth. Okay, then I'm going to take the trigger bar, put that back into place, and then I'm going to take my trigger spring, take that end, and then it goes into this little hole up here, and then that leg is up there. Okay, so then that's ready. Now again, I'm going to hold the trigger bar back so that it doesn't move, or the trigger back so that the trigger bar is not moving. And then I'm going to grab that spring with my tool, push it in, and seat it. Okay, and so that's seated That's all looking good. Okay, now what I'm gonna do is I need to reinsert this trigger safety bar and my takedown lever and my slide catch. So the first one I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put my takedown lever in place. So that comes here. I'm gonna put it in place. It needs to be like all the way forward here until it kind of drops down in. And then it's got a little slot on this other side it has to ride. So you have to get it in the right spot, and then it's retained and in that little slot. So then I'm just gonna keep it in that operate position now while I come here. And I'm gonna want this safety lever pin backed out just a hair, but not enough that it's gonna fall off or let that safety lever fall back off. So to do that, I'm gonna use this tool and just pry up a little bit, and I don't want it further than the side of that FCU. So I might have pulled it a little bit too far, so now I'm gonna have to get that reseated. So if I normally want to reseat that without taking that trigger bar off, the disconnector, exposing the through hole, then I just have to line that up to do that. So I just did that, and that wasn't that bad to do because I pulled that safety lever pin just a little bit too far. But I'll just give that safety lever pin a little bit to where this safety lever is still captured on there. Okay, and in that orientation, I can come in and put the back of this bar back in here like that, and make sure it's back behind that sear leg. And then with that up, I can keep that kind of takedown lever in the operate position, come back over here to this notch, and I should have enough leverage that I can put the back of the bar up enough to where I can kind of wedge that back into the hole, that little slot on the takedown lever on the front part of this. And then that will pop into place and should be good. Okay, so that's back into place, but I have one little issue here. I have my trigger pin walked a little bit, so it looks like it's still in place to where I could just seat that back. So you want to check that trigger pin too to make sure that it's seated and it didn't fall out when I was moving it around and stuff. Normally it won't, but it can. So anyway, I got that. Now I'm just going to push that safety lever pin back in all the way. So I can push the sear down to make that a little bit easier. I can just push it in there, and make sure that your safety lever pin is in the right orientation, or that can cause issues, which the right orientation is this flat end down. If it's 180, you can have issues getting your slide back off because the takedown lever and slide catch won't interact correctly, and it can make it difficult to get your slide back off. Okay, so now I need to seat the slide catch because I pulled that out. Say I did that on accident. So in order to do that, I first need to make sure my spring here is seated down in there, okay? Then I'm gonna kind of hold my finger over it so it doesn't pop back out. As I come in from underneath here, I'm gonna put my tool in, and I'm gonna use that little head to rotate it under the spring, and then rotate it up. And then it's gonna hold my tool. And again, I'm gonna use that like a slave pin. And I'm gonna put my takedown lever kind of in the in-between position. I'm gonna have to move it again. So I gotta get my slide catch in the right orientation. This little rounded part goes towards there. This little part has where the spring's gonna catch. I'm gonna push that back in. The tool's gonna drop, and I'm good. Now, it's not quite seating in there until I rotate this takedown lever back to the operate position so that it's got enough room for that to get by this little interaction point in here. Okay, so now that's all back together. Now I got a fully reinstalled FCU, and I've got my sear control spring. So that's the absolute hardest way that could have gone down, where I pulled out the safety lever pin, I dropped everything. So just showing you how this armorer's tool is super handy in being able to deal with all of those situations. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to finish checking the sear control spring installation to make sure we got the right sear control spring here. So to do that, I'm going to put this FCU back into the grip module. I'm going to go ahead, this was a manual safety. I'm going to leave the manual safety out until I know I've got the right sear control spring. So I checked it kind of with that gauge, and I already know it's going to probably be okay, but the right way to verify is by installing that armorer's backplate. So I'm going to push that pin back in, and then I can seat it with my back of my armorer's tool, and that's seated. Okay, so now my grip module's on. Now I can go ahead on my upper here, take off my slide cap. So this tool is super handy for that too. A lot of people have issues with getting these slide caps off with this newer style. So the right way to do this is orient your tool at about 7 o'clock with that logo down, and then come in here right like that. Just push down, and all you want to interact with is just this this little tab here. Okay, and so kind of that 7 o'clock position, and then just push it down and in, and then you can push the slide cap back off, and that pulls off. Okay, now I'm not going to bother changing out my with my reduced powered spring right now, because all I'm going to do is I'm going to finish looking at what the sear control spring is doing. So to get my armorer's plate on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to push that slide the striker sleeve down, and I've got to depress the striker safety to get it to move close. This slide cap's really easy to install because I don't have to move that tab into the striker sleeve to do it like the real cap. So I just slide that on there like that. And then it's a half plate to view the engagement. So I'm going to go ahead and install this on this slide that we just did. Okay. And I'm going to look at the engagement here. So I'm going to need a flashlight here to get enough light. See if we can get this to, there we go. Okay, so you can see in there that the sear is getting covered by the striker. So the sear is this part that is moving as I'm pulling the trigger. Okay, so, and then there's that little rectangular surface you see there. That's the part that needs to get covered completely by the striker as I'm viewing this. So I'm going to rack this again and take a look at that. Okay. So yeah, so that striker, that sear is covering pretty much completely the bottom of that striker. So that number one is like absolutely like right on the line of full coverage there. So as I start to pull that trigger, I can see that sear right there, that you could kind of see the line, that bottom of that rectangle poking out from the bottom of that. So I probably want to change that sear control spring because it's just barely poking out the bottom there. And I want that completely covered. So I'm going to change this one to a number 2. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do this the easier way this time. I'm going to take this slide back off. So I got my armorer's plate. So I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to do it the easy way this time, which is, so my takedown lever is kind of in that takedown position. So I've got a little bit of exposure to that pin. So I'm going to pull that pin, drop my safety lever, and then I'm going to pull this out to where it's about flush. And I'm looking in there at that spring at the same time. Okay, and so I found that flush point in there. So I could just turn this over and drop the spring out, or I could use my tool here, come in the back, push down, and then it's going to pull out on the spring and hold the spring. So either way is fine. And I'm going to switch to a number 2 spring. Okay, so that's on there like that. drop that down in there. Kind of push it so it falls. All right, okay. Then I just move that sear until it's lined up and then push that back in. Okay, so that's over there. Now I'm going to make sure that I have my pin flush in there so I can drop my safety lever back in there. And it's kind of hung up, so I'm gonna just back it up just slightly. Okay, and now I've got my safety lever in about the right orientation. So now I'm gonna try to do this blind where I put this safety lever back on there. So I start kind of pushing that, and it's bound up, so I didn't quite find it. So I'm gonna come to the back here to where that little safety lever tab is, move it up slightly to try to find the right orientation. And I just found the orientation, push that in. So that's the easy way. And that's the right way to do it the first time, so you don't have to take everything apart, reinstall everything. But if you do that, this tool makes it easy to put everything back together. Okay, so now that I got that, now I can reinstall and check to make sure that I got the right sear engagement. So now I have a number 2 spring installed. This gun was a little bit of a tolerance outlier, couldn't quite handle a number 1. It was pretty close, probably would have been okay, but I like to make sure that I got good margin. So now I've got my number 2 here installed. So let's see. Okay, so yeah, I definitely can't see the bottom of that rectangle until I start pulling the trigger. So that there, I know that was good. Okay, so that's the sear control spring installation. So now I can just move on to the other parts of the kit. So if I did that, then I can make sure that that part's not going to be an issue. And what that did, let me show that real quick. So what does the sear control spring do? So what the sear control spring did was it changed the position of the wall. It moved it back slightly to remove some of that travel and creep from the wall to the brake. And then it's really shortened the wall and brake and reset. So that alone is a tremendous upgrade with just the sear control spring, and that's available individually. And that's how you do the install on the sear control spring with running into any problems. So since this is a manual safety, I'm going to show how to put the manual safety back in real quick as well. So, okay, I'm going to knock that pin out again. Okay, so manual safety, make sure the takedown lever is in the operate position. Bring my manual safety. Now, since I've got a sear control spring, I'll need this modified manual safety because the ride height of my sear is a little bit lower. And so it makes a few features that need to be modified on this manual safety to be able to install it. So I might have to pull the trigger just a hair to get it down in there. Then I'll kind of rotate it into place. And I've still got my detent in place there. So what I can do now is I can do the reverse operation, and I can hold my tool kind of like that, come in here to this detent, press down, and rotate it into place. Okay, and I kept my fingers there in case, so I wouldn't launch that detent. So that's good. And then you would just verify that your safety is working correctly, that, you know, when you're in the safe position, you pull the trigger and it won't release the striker, and it, you know, goes back and forth to safe and operate as intended. So that's all good. Now that's how you do that. So now the easier parts of the install are the pre-travel stop, over travel stop, pull weight. Pull weight's just that reduced powered spring in the upper. So that's pretty straightforward on how to do that. Let's go to the pre-travel install. So that one's the pre-travel stop and then the modified slide cap. So here's a modified slide cap. It has a little relief cut on it because with reduced pre-travel, it's going to change the forward resting position of the trigger, which is going to kick up this internal safety lever slightly. And I want to make sure that I'm not going to bypass the striker safety, because that would bypass the striker safety right there. So that lifter is going to have to be down. So I can again use this gauge over here on the tool to kind of check to make sure when I have a pre-travel stop installed or I have a different trigger or something like that, if that's going to potentially be in a bypass position. The right way to check it, though, is with the armor's plate and actually verify that the striker safety is blocking until the trigger's pulled. So I'm going to grab my pre-travel stop here, and let's take a look at what the pre-travel stop is. So I'm going to set that down for a second, then flip it over. Okay, so it's got kind of two sides. There's a weld mark on that side. That's the side that's going to go under the trigger. It's kind of a little C shape, and that tab's going to go on the front of the FCU. So it's going to go, and so there's the welded end, and then there's one free layer for adjustment in case that needs to be adjusted. So to adjust that, you just bend that free layer back. It's pretty small, so you might need a knife or something to just get under there to bend it back. Bend it a few times and then it will break off. You only need to make an adjustment if certain conditions happen, which I'll explain in a second. So what I do to install this is I just pull the trigger and I put that weld mark tab in under the trigger, line that to the front of the FCU, and then it's installed just like that. Okay, and then when I go to check that in the grip module, I want to make sure it's all lined up and stuff so that it's not going to get crushed up in the grip module as I do that. So again, I'm doing a modular install, so I'm not going to install the over travel stop right now. I'm just going to do the pre-travel. So I'm going to come in here and then install that into the grip module in the normal way. It might be a little bit tight, especially on aluminum grip modules and so forth, but that's not a bad thing. You just rock it back into place, snaps in. Okay, and then install that. Now I can check. First thing I'm going to check is make sure that my pre-travel is not reduced to the point where I have an issue with my takedown lever and my slide catch. So in order to make sure that I'm going to be able to get my slide back off, I'm going to want to make sure that these interlocks work together correctly. So when I push the takedown lever forward, the slide catch should drop into place. So that means when I put the slide on, I'm going to be able to get it back off. And when I push that forward, then the takedown lever would drop back into place. So these little features on the slide catch and takedown lever are kind of backup to make sure you're not going to bypass safeties or anything. So if you are working with triggers that have like modified takedown levers and stuff, be very cautious that you might have to check your striker safety margin, because you might have a bypass condition or something like that is not good. So anyway, that's the pre-travel stop installation. What that did was that brought the forward resting trigger or position of the trigger back further. And so I'll show that over on this gun that's already got the pre-travel stop installed and the armor's cap. So with the pre-travel stop, the concern is you want to make sure that the striker safety isn't bypassed. And I pretty much can guarantee, based on the tolerance of these guns, the way that we make these pre-travel stops, you're never going to have a striker safety bypass. You're going to run into these issues where you can't take your slide off. So this one's like purposely set at the minimum to where I'm struggling to have that takedown lever stay forward. So I might have to hold that forward, and then as I pull that back, the slide catch still isn't dropping because the tolerance of this gun, I went ahead and installed that without being able to do that. So what I have to do is I'll have to hold that takedown lever forward, pull that back, and then manually push that slide catch to get that slide off. And that might be an indication if that really bothers me that I have to do that. This one's a more extreme case. It might just be as simple, just hold that takedown lever forward to be able to get that slide catch to drop. But this one purposely is a little bit more extreme. And then with that, so I might, if I don't like that behavior, then I could make that adjustment to the pre-travel stop by removing that free layer. Okay, so I want to check my striker safety. In order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the trigger so that it's past the sear is past the striker. Okay, so sear is past the striker in here, so this, yeah, I can see the sear moving up and down. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I'm going to pull the trigger and hold the gun upside down to make sure that that striker is back and being blocked by the striker safety. Then I'm going to put my armorer's tool in here right below the slide cap and in the center here. And I'm going to push on the back of the striker while I'm pulling the trigger. And the striker is being blocked from moving forward to fire a primer. And I want to verify that I've got at least an 1/8 inch of travel on the trigger until that striker safety is defeated. So if I pull the trigger, there, it defeated. So it's right about an 1/8 of an inch of travel on this one until it's defeated. And since this doesn't have a striker reset spring in here, I'll need to pull the trigger again and then drop that striker back to make sure that it's being blocked by the safety again, and then I can check that again. Oh, striker didn't get back behind the safety, so I'll shake that. Press on the back of the striker. There. Okay. All right, so now I know that I've got a functional striker safety. I checked my engagement margin, so I'm going to verify on this gun too. So this one's really aggressive. This one has a number 1 sear control spring, and it's right on the line. So I might consider going to a number 2 on this one as well, but it's just right there. So anyway, secondary check you can do is the minimum safe travel distance for these guns is 3/16 of an inch overall. So 1/8 of an inch of pre-travel and a 1/16 inch of wall to break reset. Now where that sits matters, because if it's too far back or too far forward, you could have 3/16 overall, but you could still be bypassing the striker safety. So that's why you want to manually verify your striker safety function like that. And there's those alternative checks using the gauge and so forth that you could have done to make your install go a little bit quicker. But that's the pre-travel stop installation. Like I said, there the one little nuance is how the takedown lever and slide catch work to get the slide back off. That's the reason why you might make an adjustment to the pre-travel stop. If you do make that adjustment, you get a little bit more pre-travel, so you might consider just getting used to it. Sometimes the guns will, after you take them down a little bit, those behaviors of having to hold the slide catch or the takedown lever forward when taking it down, that can go away as well. So you might just kind of leave it for a little while and see how it bothers you or not. Okay, and so that's the pre-travel stop. So I'm going to come back to this gun over here, and the last thing we're going to do is we're going to do the over travel stop, and we're going to do pull weight as well, and we'll do those kind of quickly. Over travel is, I don't recommend getting the over travel stop by itself. You won't notice much of a difference with reducing the over travel on these guns. So triggers that have over travel set screws in them and stuff, don't fall for it. It doesn't do much. You're not going to be happy with the results you get. So, when you have a sear control spring, you will notice a bit of a difference. So without an over travel stop, depending on your gun, you might have about an 1/8 of an inch travel from the wall to where the trigger stops after it releases the striker. So you might have up to a 1/16 of an inch that you could reduce with the over travel stop. So the over travel stop is 3 layers. There's a weld mark in the corner indicating that side's going to be 2 layers, 3 layers. So I can put this guy in, and again, we're doing a modular install, so we're going to uninstall the pre-travel stop so that it doesn't fall out while we're manipulating the trigger. But what I can do for a quicker install is I can put this in there behind the trigger. Okay, and though it's oriented with these little tabs with the tabs on the FCU. So I can put a drop of oil in there to kind of hold it in place better. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to check quickly. I'm going to pull the trigger back all the way, and I'm going to take a look at the right height of the sear when I'm holding the trigger back all the way. So if I line this up to where I'm looking straight up and down where I'm looking at the rails so I can see straight up and down. If I'm pulling that all the way, I can see how far that is. Roughly about what you want to see, if I'm trying to do this quick to decide if I'm going to have an issue or not, is I want to see just that the rectangular surface popping up over this line back here, and that's it. So if the sear is barely moving when I pull that, then that's likely an indicator I'm going to need to make a over travel adjustment. So I'm going to leave the 3 layers in there and see what happens. So to install this, I'm going to, and I'm leaving the pre-travel stop out again, just to make this easier. So I'm going to hold the FCU like that, put the grip module on, and if I put some oil in there, it might hold it in place a little bit better as I'm moving back and forth. So put that pin back in, and then I'm going to check this. And the armor's plate can be helpful here too. So I'm going to pull that trigger and see it does release the striker at the end of pull. So I'm going to get some light in here again. And I can see as I pull the trigger, it does release the striker, and this one's clean. So if I got to the end of the pull here and it didn't break clean, so let's see about how much travel I have. So that 3-layer stop, I'm gonna kind of measure it here. It looks like it's just a smidge over a 1/16 of an inch. So that 3-layer stop is probably about the maximum reduction that we can get, and it's a clean break. So if I did have where I would pull the trigger and it wouldn't break altogether, then that would be an indicator that I probably need to run either a 1-layer over travel stop, or maybe there's not enough over travel in the gun to reduce it all, and I might not even use the over travel stop. If it was getting to the end of pull and it's just kind of hesitating to break, and then it kind of releases the striker slowly, then I probably need to go to a 2-layer configuration or a 1-layer configuration. So all I have to do to make that adjustment to these stops is I will just come in here and I will find that free layer. So the free layer's on the opposite side of where that weld mark is. It's over on this side, and then I'll pull that apart. And then I'll just bend it back, and then it will pull apart into 1-layer and 2-layer configuration. And what I realized that I did here was I didn't actually use the 3-layer on this gun, so I probably can show what happens if that was the case. So I'm gonna quickly pull this back out. Oh, I didn't even have the stop installed, so it must have fallen out when I was going to put it in. So I was looking through the camera and didn't bother to make sure that I was aligned, and it probably fell out while I was going to put it in. So let's check that now with the 3-layer stop installed. Okay. All right, so it's definitely shorter, and it is breaking clean with the 3-layer. And then I'm gonna measure the travel distance, put my thumb there so I can see. It's right at around a 1/16 inch. So that's like the best that can be done with that gun. So if you do need to make an adjustment, that's how you do that. Okay, and then the last thing on the modular install would be to come back into this upper and to replace the striker safety spring with our reduced powered one. So that's all by itself, available individually. That will drop the pull weight by up to a pound. The way that I like to set pull weight on these guns is sometimes they can be a smidge too light, and in which case I'll leave the stock striker safety spring in there. And this is dependent on after the gun has a break-in period. Probably 1,000 rounds or so. You might want a polished striker too. That will give you the best feel. And all that needs to be polished on that is just this surface here that interfaces with that rectangular surface on the sear. We have those available already. You can polish them yourselves. You can just let the gun wear in and it will get pretty close to the same. So I'm going to take off my armor slide cap because I did my safety checks and everything. Everything was good on this gun. So I'm going to hold that striker safety down and pull that out, and then it's under spring tension, so I'm going to let that drop and grab the spring. Okay, I'm going to grab my reduced powered spring here, put that into that notch, and the spring side goes that direction. Put that in here and make sure that it's moving back and forth, up and down. Okay, put my striker assembly back in place, and I could have replaced it with the polished one, or I could have polished. And now I'm ready to install. Oh, if you do polish a striker or switch out your striker, make sure you use the striker when you do all these checks and everything. And we can do final checks after we're done too. Again, you can re-perform the safety checks and the margin checks on sear engagement and everything with that armorer's plate. But anyway, if I want to go and put on the normal plate, I can do it a few different ways. So I push down on that striker sleeve, and it's not moving all the way down until I push the striker safety in. Now it moves down, then I can push this little tab into the center here, hold that, then I can grab now this is my modified slide cap, and put that on there. Now, if my fingers are a little big for doing that, then I can use my armorer's tool here on the flat side, put it on that sleeve up to the top, do the same thing, push that down. Now I just come in here, even if I got a big fat digit, that will work just fine. Just kind of move that in, and then I hold that down, and then that gives me margin to just start pushing that back out, and then that goes on, snaps into place, then I'm good to go. So again, this tool is very easy for removing this slide cap and reinstalling. So push down into the center, there you go. And one thing is I don't recommend using any metal tools or anything on that striker sleeve other than this tab up here, because you can start to mar up that striker sleeve, and you can have issues where as the striker is pulled, it interacts with a messed up striker sleeve, and that can cause the slide to start to pull back as the trigger's pulled. So if you start to see that, you know it's probably your striker sleeve that's your issue. One thing to note is we don't recommend using aftermarket strikers, especially ones with geometry changes. They're not compatible with the sear control spring. They can cause primer strike reliability issues. They're super expensive. They're solving problems that don't really exist, so I don't really recommend doing that. Even the steel striker sleeves, just use the right tool and just interact with just that tab and you're good. So that's pretty much the full install, the extended version with all the things that can go wrong and the things that you can run into. So when you use this video, you're going to want to use it as kind of a reference for all these actions. So when you're doing this, you can go forward to the different parts and the different actions. Feel free to forward through. You don't take it as you're supposed to pull parts out. I was just showing you if you happen to, that's how you would do it. So anyway, hopefully this helps give you an idea of what value the armorer's kit and our armorer's tool gives you, and how you would do a modular install and some of the troubleshooting and evaluation steps. These trigger kits we've sold a lot of them. We've had a lot of experience with the installs and so forth. If you have any issues, anything out of character with what you've seen here, feel free to contact us and we can help you work out any issues. Thanks for watching.